But what really gets me is the way she has infiltrated my love life. Ever since my first boyfriend, Kelsey had put her full efforts into seducing them and taking them away from me. The sad part is, it actually worked, since my sister was extremely beautiful. She even did some modeling for a while in Paris, but was fired when she had an affair with her boss's husband. My name is Martha, and my horrid sister's name is Kelsey. The reason I call her horrid is because ever since day one, she has been a snake and tricked my parents into loving her more. My parents aren't free of blame either, of course, but at least they are also victims of my sister. The earliest time I can remember my sister's trickery was when we were only 6 years old. We were playing with one of the toys my dad had saved up and bought us, when she completely destroyed it. Then she bit herself, began crying, and ran to my parents and told them that I destroyed the toy and bit her. Unfortunately, my parents believed her, and from that point on, this buffoonery was commonplace in our household. So we are 25 now, and she has completely turned my parents against me. So now my parents still favors her and will send her money whenever she needs it. Recently, they helped her pay for her car, but when I ask for help, they will say they don't have money. But what really gets me is the way she has infiltrated my love life. Ever since my first boyfriend, Kelsey had put her full efforts into seducing them and taking them away from me. The sad part is, it actually worked, since my sister was extremely beautiful. She even did some modeling for a while in Paris, but was fired when she had an affair with her boss's husband. Anyways, she had stolen a total of 3 boyfriends from me in the past, all of which eventually dumped her when they found out how much of a demon she really was. I even heard that she would steal money from them and threaten them with incriminating knowledge if they told anyone about it. What makes it even worse was that my parents would actually support my sister's actions if they liked the guy, since they loved my sister more and wanted her to be with a good guy.
Well, you seem like a very good young man. Maybe you should consider dating Kelsey. She is a wonderful girl and much more attractive than Martha. Take a look.
Yes, I think Kelsey would be a much better fit for you. Martha is a brat and Kelsey is an angel. You should be with her instead.
My boyfriend dumped me on the spot and began dating Kelsey. I cried for days while my sister just laughed at me. But recently, I met the perfect man, and I wasn't going to let my sister steal him away like she always did. His name is Joe, and he's everything I had ever dreamed of in a man. He's tall, strong, and has the kindest heart you'll ever encounter. I purposely had hid him from my family in order to keep him from my sister, but I have begun to feel insecure about doing this. I realize that if I trust my boyfriend, I should be able to introduce him to my family without worrying about my sister stealing him away. Plus, if he falls for her seduction, then he isn't the one for me anyway. I was putting a lot of thought into this because I could really see myself getting married to Joe one day, and I wanted everything to be out on the table. So I told him it was time to meet my family.
That sounds great. I can't wait.
There is one thing I need to tell you, though. It's my sister. She's a demon. She does this weird thing where she tries and seduces all my boyfriends. Just wanted to warn you.
Well, you won't have to worry about that. I'm with you.
Well, she's very beautiful, and I sometimes get insecure that I'm not as good-looking as her.
Well, from what it sounds like, your sister is ugly on the inside, and that's what really matters.
Joe's words made me feel secure, and I suddenly felt okay about our gathering with my parents. However, the gathering would end up in a complete disaster. When we arrived, my parents refused to open the door. What could this be about? Did I do something wrong? It took them almost an hour to come out and talk to me, and what they told me made me sick.
Kelsey told us everything. We know what you do. You are a dirty person.
What? What are you talking about?
We know you're a prostitute now. Your sister told us.
We are so disappointed. We never want to see you again.
My mother, my dad, and Kelsey all began verbally harassing me and Joe. They even accused Joe of being my pimp. I was disgusted and in complete shock and horror at how far my sister had taken things. This was over the line, and I was going to do something about it. I told Joe I was fed up and convinced him to help me take revenge on my demon sister. First of all, I noticed during my visit that my sister was wearing some high-end jewelry, stuff which she could definitely not afford, since she is only a cashier. We concluded that it must mean that she is stealing from somewhere. Next, I knew that she was bound to make a move on Joe, since that was just in her nature. So me and Joe formed a master plan, and it began with him going along with Kelsey's seduction, only to set her up. Just as expected, Kelsey called late that night, and Joe set up a date with her to extract some information. The next night, he arrived at their date wired up with a mic, while I sat in the car listening and recording their conversation. After the small talk, Joe began asking the real questions.
So tell me, where did you get that watch?
Oh, well, I got it from Gucci.
It looks nice. It must have cost a fortune.
Yeah, well, can I tell you a secret?
Sure.
I only could afford it because I figured out how to wire money directly from my stupid parents' savings into my own, without any trace. It's the perfect crime.
Joe tried not to have a reaction, and he went along with it. After the date, we reviewed the tapes and made sure you could hear every word of her evil confession. Next, we brought the evidence to the police, who confirmed she could get charged with some very serious crimes for something like this, which was nice to hear. But it wasn't time for that yet. There was more to our plan. We called up every boyfriend my sister had stolen from over the years and told them to meet at my parents' house to collect the money my sister owed them. Once me, Joe, and all of these old boyfriends had gathered outside of my parents' house, they finally all came out to see what all the commotion was. I played the tape for my parents, who were shocked and disgusted that their favorite daughter could be so evil. Then, the old boyfriends started shouting at my sister and demanding they get their money back as well. When my sister told them she had nothing left, since she spent it all on jewelry, the men stormed inside and took every piece of expensive jewelry she had, and they ran off with it, leaving her with nothing. Before the last man was able to escape, my dad tackled him to the ground and began beating him. I knew this was the perfect time to get the police involved. I called the police, who rushed to the scene, just in time to see my dad beating the man. When they asked what had happened, I explained that my dad was trying to rob the young man of his jewelry, and they quickly cuffed my dad. He tried to tell them they were wrong, but they just didn't believe him, and believed me instead. Next, I showed the tape with my sister's confession to the police, who were enraged at such a crime. They asked my mother if this was true, and she told them it was. Shockingly, she decided to press charges, and both my sister and father were both hauled away. My mother tried to reconcile with me and apologize, but I told her it was too late for that. I left that house and never talked to her again. I never talked to any of them again for that matter. Me and Joe are married now, and are living our best life. My dad ended up getting the maximum sentence for his crime, which was 5 years. My sister was sentenced to 15 years for all of her stealing, and they are both in maximum security prisons. I heard that my sister has spent many hours in solitary confinement because she tried seducing the prison guards. I also heard that my dad has been beaten up countless times for his short temper. I drove past my mother's house the other day, and I saw her through the window. She was sitting all alone in her house, rocking in her rocking chair. She has nobody left. I will never speak to her again, and her favorite daughter ended up being a demon. The only person that will still speak to her would be my father, but that's if he makes it out of that prison alive. And even then, I don't think he will ever be the same. Sometimes I feel like this was all too much, but then I remember the countless years of pain and agony I endured because of favoritism, and I changed my mind. What do you think? Did I do the right thing? Then, I felt a sharp pain in my stomach and I dropped to the floor. I was going into labor. Chris, I'm going into labor now. You need to drive me to the hospital.
No. If you're so sure I'm cheating on you, then that's what I'll do. Maybe this will teach you a lesson on snooping.
And just like that, Chris walked out on me as I was going into labor with our child. Hi, my name is Tracy, and boy do I have a traumatic story to tell you. I had this boyfriend named Chris, who at the time seemed to be the best guy you could possibly imagine. We met at work, where I worked as a nurse and he as a doctor. Things were going amazing, like really amazing. So amazing that I got pregnant out of the blue, and we both decided we needed to keep it, as we both despised the idea of abortion. We agreed to get married after the baby was born, an idea that would come in handy later on. One day, I was over Chris's house getting ready for a movie date. He was in the shower and I was putting on my makeup when I heard a knock at the door. I answered the door and was met with a middle-aged woman wearing inappropriate lingerie. She seemed shocked to see me and became very embarrassed. "Who the hell are you?"
Pizza delivery, wrong house, sorry.
"What the?" The woman ran back to her car and drove off. She was obviously lying about the pizza, and it really threw me off. When Chris got out of the shower, I questioned him about this awkward encounter.
Haha, yay. That's really weird. I have no idea what that was about.
He seemed really nervous and kept scratching his head. The next couple of days, I couldn't get this incident out of my head, and I decided I needed to get to the bottom of it. The next time I was at Chris's house, I waited until he went to the bathroom, and I went through his phone. To my surprise, it looked clean until I saw an app I didn't recognize. It was a secret picture app, and I began to go through it. To my horror and shock, there were hundreds of X-rated pictures and videos of my boyfriend and that same middle-aged woman who had been at his house a few days earlier. I struggled to hold my tears back as I screenshotted and sent myself some of the most incriminating ones as evidence, and then tried to continue to act calm for the rest of the night. However, my anxiety got the best of me, and I burst out yelling after we had dinner at his place. "I know you're cheating on me."
What? What do you mean?
"That woman who showed up the other day, she's your mistress. I saw all the pictures and videos."
You evil pig, you went through my phone?
"I think what you did was much worse. I mean, we're about to have a baby together." Then, I felt a sharp pain in my stomach and I dropped to the floor. I was going into labor. "Chris, I'm going into labor now. You need to drive me to the hospital."
No. If you're so sure I'm cheating on you, then that's what I'll do. Maybe this will teach you a lesson on snooping.
And just like that, Chris walked out on me as I was going into labor with our child. I knew right then and there that I was not going to marry that evil man. I took out my phone and called my older brother, who rushed to get me and take me to the hospital. He was there for me the whole time, and my parents came too to keep me company. After several hours, I finally gave birth to a beautiful baby boy, and I named him Brady after my great-grandfather. I tried calling Chris, but he just ignored all of my calls. I knew he was with that middle-aged woman, probably cheating on me as I sat there with our son. When I finally went home, my parents and brother questioned me on my Chris had not shown face. I wanted to make an excuse for him, but I decided to come clean about what was going on. My parents became furious, and my brother became completely irate. He had always been protective of me, and I had never seen him so mad before in my life. He immediately began plotting with me on how we would take revenge. Me and my family talked, and I decided that I wanted nothing to do with Chris anymore, but he wasn't going to get off that easy. Finally, Chris called me back and told me he was ready to see his son. I decided I would hide a microphone on my body so I could record our conversation and hopefully get some more evidence. We met at his house, and I brought Brady along. As soon as he saw his son, he immediately started saying horrible things. It was like his whole personality changed now that I had discovered he was a cheater.
Brady? What an ugly name. I can't be that surprised when his mother is as ugly as you. You know, you used to be kind of hot, but now you're just fat, and it made you ugly.
How can you be so horrible to me? I thought you loved me.
Nope, I never did. That's why I've been cheating since almost day one.
I couldn't stand it anymore, so I ran away crying. When I got home, I showed my family the voice recording of the confession from Chris, along with the X-rated pictures and videos to go with it. My brother took all of this in and calmly told me he had a plan. The next day, we called all of Chris's friends and relatives and told them they would need to show their faces at our house that night for an intervention for Chris. We lied and told them that Chris was struggling with a drug addiction and that he desperately needed this intervention as a wake-up call. Almost all of the people we called agreed to come show their support, including his parents, grandparents, siblings, his boss, all of his best friends, and even some of his best friends' wives. That night, they all piled into our living room and we sat in a circle and waited for the next part of the plan. I went into the other room and called Chris. I told him he needed to come over immediately because there was a problem with Brady. Chris rushed over and bolted inside, only to be met with a sea of people from his life.
What the hell is going on here?
Chris, you're going to want to sit down. Chris sat down, and I began to tell the whole story. I confessed to my lies and told everyone that they were not there because of Chris's imaginary drug problem, but they were there to bear witness to how much of a scumbag Chris truly is. I told them everything, about the cheating, about the emotional abuse, and about how he ditched me as I was going into labor. Then I laid the evidence on them. I showed them all of the X-rated pictures and videos I had, and played the voice recording for them as well. Just then, a man started yelling from his seat. It was Chris's best friend, and he had noticed something horrible. He realized that the woman in the X-rated pictures and videos was his own wife, meaning his best friend had betrayed him.
You are the worst person I've ever met. I knew something was going on. You ruined my life.
The man ran out crying. Next, Chris's boss stood up and fired Chris in front of all of us.
I can't imagine the thought of facing you again at work. You are fired, effective immediately.
Chris's boss stormed out, slamming the door behind him. Then, Chris's grandparents stood up and told Chris that they were unbelievably disappointed in him, and that they never wanted to see him again. They told him that they no longer thought of him as family, and they too walked out. Chris's parents were the next to confront him.
Son, you clearly have a lot to work through. Me and your father are no longer a part of your life, and you are no longer our son. Please never contact us again. Goodbye.
Chris stood up and dropped to his knees, and he began to sob violently. I couldn't help but laugh in his face. And me, my brother, my mom and dad all had a hearty laugh.
This isn't fair. You ugly cow. You can't just ruin my entire life from one little mistake.
Chris began charging at me full speed with his fist in the air, ready to hit me. My brother jumped out in front of him and smashed him in the face. He immediately collapsed to the ground with a clearly broken nose. My family stood over him with smiles on our faces and told him exactly what was going to happen next. We told him that he was going to begin child support payments starting tomorrow for double the max amount. We told him that if he refused, or if he missed a payment, then we would release his little videos and pictures to the world, forever putting shame on him and his mistress's name. If those got out, he would never be able to work again. We told him that these payments were to continue until Brayden was 18, and until then he would have zero contact with his son.
But he's my son. I want to see him.
Too bad. You had your chance at a happy family and you ruined it. Chris grappled with the thought of his life being over, but ultimately decided his best course of action would be to agree to my demands. He had to work extremely hard as a doctor, but almost all of his paycheck went directly to me and my son, leaving him with almost nothing. I hear he now lives in the worst part of town with 3 drug addict roommates and often goes hungry as he is unable to feed himself. As for his mistress, well, she was kicked out of her house by her husband and is now homeless. Hey, maybe the two of them can live together under a bridge one day after Chris retires and is left with nothing. Do you think I'm being too harsh? Or do you think my master plan worked perfectly? Do you think he deserved it?